Hey guys, welcome to a very special video today. I know I said before that I was going to do this, so now I'm finally here to bring you my tier list, my first tier list ranking on this channel, and maybe not the last, but I wanted to share my thoughts on the founding fathers of rock and roll now that all of them have since passed on as of October with the passing of Jerry Lee Lewis. So I figured, what better time than now to get on here and talk about these very, very influential musicians, probably the most so besides, I don't know, the Beatles and Bob Dylan in popular music in general. So yeah, going to get into this here. I have them all ranked, or well, not ranked at the bottom. I have all their pictures down there. You can see. I'm not including some of the early influences from the inaugural Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class, like Robert Johnson and Jimmy Rogers, just because I want to stick strictly to the four founders of rock and roll itself, because obviously Robert Johnson should be given an honorable mention, especially on here, since he basically created the blues, the Delta blues as we know them. So I'm just going to get into this today, and let's start off right here with Ray Charles. I mean, what can you say about Ray Charles? Well, I'll tell you, he goes in the A tier. That is for sure. Because also, I want to say I'm ranking this kind of on personal preference, but definitely influence takes a lot into account as well. But obviously, we all know these guys are influential, so we're just going to be throwing them where I think I personally would put them. And Ray Charles, I mean, what can you say? This man basically created soul music. His fusion of blues, jazz, rhythm and blues, and gospel really was unheard of at the time. And when he broke out with singles like "Hallelujah, I Love Her So," "I Got a Woman," of course, "What I'd Say," which really was the most sexual record to ever be put on radio at that time, where basically he's recreating these sounds of akin to orgasms with these women, and their playoff is just incredible. The banter they have and vocal chemistry on that song, but also just that amazing electric organ riff. My goodness, I mean, you could just give him all the credit in the world for that recording alone. But then, of course, he had beautiful recordings later on, like "Georgia on My Mind," which is now, I think it's the state anthem from Georgia. But you Georgians, correct me. I know there's a few of you here. And also, I mean, so many iconic hits like "Hit the Road, Jack." I mean, who doesn't know that song? You could go on and on about how amazing Ray Charles was. Amazing piano player. The fact that he was blinded at a young age and was still able to achieve all this success as a musician and otherwise, got to give him all the credit of the world. Absolutely deserves to be in the A tier. But I don't think he had really too many records that I absolutely love. Of course, his debut album comes to mind, which is my personal favorite. But gotta give Ray Charles all the credit he's deserved. Everly Brothers, okay. Yeah, these guys, obviously very, very influential on vocal groups, and I think their harmonies and chemistry with each other have not since been equaled. I'm going to put them in the C tier, though. This doesn't mean that they're bad at all. I don't feel that at all about the Everly Brothers, but when you really think about it, I mean, look, they have obviously "Bye Bye Love," which is just such an iconic classic. "Wake Up Little Susie," really, really fun song, and very kind of ahead of its time in regards to how clever it is. And of course, "All I Have to Do Is Dream" is such an incredible ballad. But I don't know. I don't really think these guys, besides their harmonies, there wasn't really anything else about them that makes them stand out more than these other pioneers on this list. I solely give them the credit for their harmonies, which obviously we wouldn't have Simon and Garfunkel without them, who I think are much better, and I think Paul Simon took what they did and just ran with it and really brought some interesting ideas from a songwriting standpoint as well as a sonic one. So I don't really think they have many great albums to my understanding outside of the few hits that they have, so that's why I put them in C tier there. And Fats Domino, he's going to be the same. Look, got to give a lot of respect to Fats Domino here. One of the best jammers, you could say, on the piano. That man could play. And of course, you got to talk about hits like Ain't It a Shame, and of course his enduring recording of Blueberry Hill, which really, this was really interesting what Fats Domino did, because he fused, that kind of jazzy style with the horns that hadn't really been done in rock and roll yet, playing off his piano. But I find a lot of his music to be quite rudimentary, if I'm being honest, and I get it, it's the 50s, but I think considering how incendiary some of these other artists are, I just don't think, besides his piano playing and a few hits here or there, that he really stood out amongst this bunch. But obviously, an iconic artist, got to give him respect nonetheless. Oh, man. Sam Cooke. Sam Cooke, man. Obviously, one of the most iconic vocalists of all time. He has to be at least top 5 greatest singers who ever lived. And he certainly belongs in the A tier. I'd even put him above Ray Charles. He's so close to being S for me, though. I mean, he's right on the cusp, but my goodness, he really was considered the king of soul. Now, I certainly don't think he's entirely deserving of that moniker if we look at someone like Otis Redding, who obviously was very, very influenced by Sam Cooke. But my goodness, the voice of an absolute titan, just so pure and so powerful. Every note he sang with such truth. The more I listen to Sam Cooke over and over again, the more I'm just blown away and entrenched in his beautiful singing voice that he had. Of course, so many great songs. What a Wonderful World. So not the Louis Armstrong one, but really, really great. Used very well in Animal House, I might add. Of course, Bring It On Home to Me is one of his most enduring classic songs. So many. Another Saturday Night. My goodness. Just the way he combined soul music. And he was very much more pop than he was soul. I think. And so maybe that's another reason why I don't have him in S. I mean, obviously, such a legendary and prominent figure in the genre. Of course, we have to talk about, though, his absolute anthem. Why am I blanking on it? Of course I know the song. A Change Is Gonna Come, which really was his answer to Bob Dylan's Blowin' in the Wind. The white boy can write better than us. Well, he showed Bob Dylan, and it's just so sad that just the tragedy that occurred, the loss of his life was just so tragic. Because can you imagine what he would have done in the 70s and what he would have done for black music, especially writing such a powerful anthem that really wasn't appreciated in his lifetime, but slowly became a civil rights anthem as the years after his life progressed on. Sam Cooke, I mean, really is one of the most influential vocalists of all time. Without him, we wouldn't have Aretha, we wouldn't have Otis, we wouldn't have all these guys like Solomon Burke who came in and really pushed things a little bit further. You got to give Sam Cooke all the credit in the world. An absolute favorite of mine. I also love, I have to mention, Ain't That Good News. That album is just fantastic. The last album he came out with before he had passed, which features A Change Is Going to Come. And really can't beat Sam Cooke, though maybe a few of these artists will, but we'll see about that. Of course, we have Jerry Lee Lewis, the rebel, the pedophile, the incest loving man, I guess you could say. Obviously the most recent past on this list. I'm going to put him in B tier because, look, say what you will about the man as a person, but he might as well have been the greatest pianist in rock music ever. Which is crazy considering this is like including the likes of Ray Charles, and of course, I mean, so many pianists that followed after, like Elton John, like Billy Joel. I just don't think anyone comes quite close to how crazy this man was on the keys. Especially if you listen to his cover of, I think it was Live at Hamburg, of Money, That's What I Want. Really is probably the best cover of that song. I mean, he's just going absolutely hog wild on the keys. And of course, everyone knew him for his wild man persona, jumping up on the piano, There was nothing like it at the time, and he's absolutely crazy then, and he probably was absolutely crazy in recent years. I don't know. He was pretty old and looked on like he was on the verge of death, so I can't really say too much in that sense. But really, I think he lands himself here because, of course, I mean, we have to mention the hits like Great Balls of Fire. I also really love his cover of Crazy Arms, which obviously Patsy Cline is known for, but I think his cover is just exceptional. Of course, you got to mention, I don't know why I'm blanking on this. Well, obviously High School Confidential. Why am I blanking on the other song? Please tell me in the comments what it is, because it should be coming to me at the top of my head, but it's not really. But yeah, I mean, look, I think outside of a few records, he really wasn't. I don't know. Like, he had a few years in the spotlight, and then he married his 13-year-old cousin, and then everybody disowned him, rightfully so, which I'm surprised they did in the 50s. But then, of course, he had a comeback as a country artist, a very successful one at that. And I think it's really interesting that his career kind of took that trajectory. But obviously, they gave him another chance, and he quite found a home in that genre. Though I don't think it comes close to what he was doing in the early 50s. Yeah, I mean, this really is, he's a pioneer like no other, even though I think he doesn't have as many substantial records because his career really kind of was justifiably so cut short for a little bit. And yeah, but obviously really, really talented guy, regardless of what you say about him, and deserves to be at least B tier, I think. Oh, Little Richard, here we go. Woo! I mean, yeah, come on. Little Richard, man. Gotta go in the A tier. Obviously, one of the most iconic, one of the most influential artists of all time, especially for the LGBT community, even though he later said he wasn't gay, but I certainly don't believe that. Obviously, his androgynous look inspired the likes of David Bowie, Prince, and everyone in their wake, obviously. Started the careers of so many artists, including Jimi Hendrix, the Beatles. Obviously, he gave them a jumpstart. The Rolling Stones. Obviously, Elton John, is a huge influence on him. Great piano player. One of the greatest vocalists of all time. You got to throw him in the top 10 at least. I mean, the first time I listened to his debut album, Here's Little Richard, and I heard Tutti Frutti for the first time, it was like it shattered my ears in the best way possible. I mean, this guy was an insane vocalist with grit that we have not heard since. And he could just scream like a bastard. I mean, this guy was just incredible. Of course, you got to mention so many great songs like Lucille, Long Tall Sally, Slippin' and Slidin', Ready Teddy. I mean, this guy had so many hits just off that first album, which I think is one of the best records from the 50s, if you guys remember my video. And just absolutely amazing what Little Richard did. I mean, his influence can't be undertook or mistaken whatsoever. He's one of a kind. Of course, really being a queer man in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and being so outwardly flamboyant and open about it. Nobody was doing what he was doing. A true diva. If there ever was one, I mean, Little Richard certainly fits the bill. Incendiary personality. Just, my goodness, every interview you watch with Little Richard, I mean, there's no shortage of energy. I think that came through in his performances, his vocals, his playing. My goodness, I mean, Little Richard is one of the most prominent figures in music, in the development of music. Gotta at least put him in the A tier. Not my favorite of all time, but certainly one that I love and absolutely respect. Oh man, now we get to Buddy Holly. Obviously, his career was so tragically cut short on the day the music died, and the plane crash that took him, Richie Valens, and the Big Bopper, as well as everyone else on board. But 22 years old, I mean, this guy was younger than me when he passed, and I still haven't made anything quite as good as he did. I gotta put him in S. I think that Buddy Holly was one of the most ingenious songwriters of his era, and I think of all time. I mean, sure, he wasn't really writing anything super profound, but his melodies were really the foundation of pop music as we know it The Beatles wouldn't be around here without him. Literally everybody wouldn't have been anywhere in pop without Buddy Holly. I mean, and just the jangly guitars and stuff, like the riffs, everything about him just screamed, and of course his image of that very, oh shucks 1950s look, but I mean, that's selling him short. I mean, the glasses, so he made nerds look cool. Just a really underrated guitar player at the very least, and of course his work with the Crickets, the 4-band lineup, really set the standard for everybody to follow, like the Beatles, and really set the standard for every format for the bands that came into the 1960s and onward. I mean, you gotta give credit to Buddy Holly and the Crickets for that. But my goodness, so many great hits. Of course, Peggy Sue, That'll Be the Day, Every Day with the amazing glockenspiel. And this is the other thing that was so great about Buddy Holly. I think he was using instruments in a way that a lot of other people didn't. Like, as I said, with Every Day. But of course, even recordings that he did right before he died, like True Love Ways, and the way he implemented orchestration, I think he was a bit ahead of his time than some of his contemporaries in that sense. I just think he was a lean, mean songwriter. Of course, I also have to mention Rave On, which is another absolute Buddy Holly classic. Someone could throw a book of Buddy Holly songs at you, and I guarantee most of them would be classics. I'm not a fan. I do like Not Fade Away, but I think the backing vocals on that track kind of date it pretty badly. You could say the thing That Will Be the Day as well, instead of Not Fade Away, but I don't know. He just, everything about him as a songwriter, his look is so iconic. The bespectacled man who could really rock the whole world, and just by all accounts a very, very cordial and decent guy. And it's just sad that someone like him, as opposed to some of these other people on here that we've talked about and haven't talked about, had to die so young, because he was truly a legend in his own time, and still a legend to this day. Absolutely beyond influential in every single way. Deserves to be an S tier, unquestionably. And this brings me to none other than James Brown, who obviously the godfather of funk music. I mean, without him, we wouldn't have Sly and the Family Stone. We wouldn't have any of the funk act. We wouldn't have George Clinton. We wouldn't have any of these guys. Really, without Prince, obviously. Yet again, another one who could move like a motherfucker, man. I mean, maybe the greatest performer of all time. You could throw him or Michael Jackson in the argument, but Michael Jackson copied James Brown's moves. So, I mean, you got to give him some credit there. And I probably will put him in A tier for now. Honestly, he could go in S tier, because, I mean, this man also was the basis for the entirety of the hip-hop genre. I mean, how many times has this guy been sampled? How many times has this guy been referenced? My goodness. I mean, you got to give James Brown so much more credit than maybe all of these guys, which is kind of why I'm tempted to put him in the S tier, but I think solely because I need to listen to more James Brown, that I don't put him quite there yet. Of course, yet again, one of the top 10 vocalists of all time, I've got to say. I mean, when he screamed, nobody screamed like James Brown did. And yet again, like, his voice was so funky, so sexy, so powerful. Everything about him was just undeniable. Charisma, of course, the hardest working man in show business, and also one of the worst woman beaters of all time, maybe. Just really not a great guy. Of course, if you ever seen the coked up interview from him from the 80s, I mean, maybe I'll link it in the description below. You have to check it out. I mean, it's something. I'll tell you that at the very least. But James Brown, I mean, yeah, so influential in every single way. I honestly want to put him higher. But for now, I'm going to stick him, honestly, just out of respect, I'll put him above Sam Cooke. I don't know how do we move this over? Hold on. This is taking a while. Okay, there we go. And then we get none other than Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry, considered by some to be the king of rock and roll, I mean, really set the blueprint for what rock and roll is with his hard-driving riffs. Probably one of the greatest guitar players of all time. Certainly the most influential. It's unbelievable what he was able to do even at that time, and still impresses me to this day. I probably would still have him in the top 10 guitar players. But I'm going to put him here in A. I'm sorry. The thing with Chuck Berry, obviously, yet again, another extremely questionable human being. And as Billy Joel says, only the good die young. Maybe that's why Buddy Holly died at 22. But look, Chuck Berry, man, I just think a lot of his riffs are very, very similar. And I think they get very samey after a while. And obviously, I think that, you got to give credit to Johnny B. Goode, which is one of the most enduring classics in music in general. Of course, School Days is a personal favorite of mine. Memphis, Tennessee, I think was one of the first truly brilliant rock and roll records from a lyrical standpoint and a storytelling standpoint. Because obviously, he gets the most credit as a songwriter in rock and roll. I still prefer Buddy Holly as a songwriter over Chuck Berry, but there's no denying how brilliant this man is, especially that song, how he slowly reveals the details and switches the whole narrative on its head by the time you get to the end of it. I mean, nothing was like that at the time, and nobody was writing songs that interesting. And of course, I mean, he still wasn't the most profound songwriter, right? I mean, he wasn't writing about anything super, super interesting. But of course, you got to give him so many great hits. Of course, You Never Can Tell, which has been immortalized in that dance sequence in Pulp Fiction. I mean, Chuck Berry's an undeniable, an undisputable icon in rock music and music in general. One of the most influential musicians to ever do it. Nobody would be around without Chuck Berry. I think, not even Elvis or any of these guys. Everyone, say what you will about who the king of rock and roll is, but Chuck Berry, man, it's undeniable that he might be the most influential from that standpoint. But I just think there could have been a bit more variety in his work to put him a bit above and beyond some of these guys. But still love Chuck Berry, just not my personal favorite, but an absolute influential icon in the industry. And of course, that leaves us with none other than Elvis Aaron Presley. And I know a lot of people have mixed thoughts about his legacy in rock and roll and have accused him of cultural appropriation, which I think is very, very appropriate. But at the same time, I have to put him at the top. Yeah, he's the king. This is the thing. I mean, most of these guys, except Ray Charles, I think, love and respected Elvis because there was never a better motherfucker to do this. I mean, okay, let's be honest. Elvis was awesome. And this is the thing. Yeah, I think the whole argument with cultural appropriation, it is certainly true. But I don't think that was necessarily Elvis's fault either. He was a product of the industry at the time. But on the same token, I feel like it's all about execution and how talented you are. And Elvis might as well have been one of the most talented performers of all time, one of the most iconic vocalists, and probably my top 3 vocalist of all time. Just so iconic, that voice of his, and why he's spawned so many imitators over the years. There's just something about Elvis that's so undeniably cool, and of course, really just changed culture overnight, especially when he performed on the Ed Sullivan Show for the first time, and all the teenage girls dropped their panties. I mean, Elvis was a rebel of sorts, not by his own choosing. Well, actually, kind of, because he was the one who said, I want to shake my hips, you know. And he did, much to the chagrin of every conservative American household at the time, which is funny because, I mean, he saw himself as a good Christian boy, you know, but it was all about the music for him. It didn't matter if he didn't write these songs. I think it's what he did with them. something, and I think Robert Plant was saying this, there's something so animalistic about his voice. You listen to Heartbreak Hotel and just the inflections, the tonality, everything about it, and then you listen to some of the stuff he did later when he kind of got out of his movie contract and wanted to make more serious records, of course, with from Elvis and Memphis, is such a great album, and probably serious man's Elvis, you could say, thinking man's Elvis, if you will. And you could just see how exponentially he grew as a vocalist throughout the years. And of course, if you've ever seen one of his last performances of Unchained Melody, it's unbelievable. At the verge of his deathbed, he's able to give this such bravado and just death-defying performance. It really is. I know people are split on his voice, but really, I think from a technical standpoint, you have to give him the most credit in some ways. Though you could make the argument for James Brown, Little Richard, Ray Charles, Sam Cooke, etc. But I certainly have him at 1. He's my personal favorite artist on this list. It's Elvis, man. I mean, say what you will about him taking black music and turning it into his own. There's no denying how well he delivered it, how well he was fitted into his own lane, and how much he changed culture, whether it was appropriated or not. I think Elvis is one of the most iconic people who ever lived. Not just musicians, people. And I think that has to be given all the shine and attention. There's no denying how culturally significant Elvis was when he hit the scene. And still to this day, it's undeniable that Elvis is still an icon. Obviously, his biopic, say what you will about it, made gangbusters at the box office, nabbed Austin Butler a well-deserved Academy Award nomination for his performance as the King of Rock and Roll. And everyone's still talking about him to this day. Rest in peace, Lisa Marie Presley. His family's just been plagued with tragedy. Yet again, another tragic death in rock and roll. Whether you blame Colonel Tom Parker for that, it's up to you. But I think there's a lot of elements that kind of drove Elvis to an early grave, unfortunately. But an amazing artist and one who really transcends time. I think more so than anybody on this list. So yeah, guys, that's my ranking. Obviously, no one in D tier because, let's be honest, none of these guys are bad musicians or bad artists, and they certainly don't deserve to be that low. But this is my ranking of the inaugural 1986 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class. So tell me what you think. Do you agree with the ranking? Would you have some people higher? I understand. If you want James Brown in S tier, I completely get it. And he might as well move up there one day. We'll see. But as for now, this is my ranking as it stands. So, of course, if you like what you're seeing here, smash the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you're here for the first time. I'm going to be trying to bring more of these down the line. Maybe not in this vein, but if you guys want to see more rankings of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame classes, let me know. I still need to brush up on some other classes and some of the artists in each individual one. But yeah, guys, hope you enjoyed this video, and until the next one, I'll see you later.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time.